Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper, where forgotten civilizations, unexplained wonders, and ancient secrets come back to life. Ready to unravel the mystery? Let's begin the journey. In a remote corner of the Pacific Ocean lies a mysterious abandoned city built of massive black stones. It is called Nan Madol, the Venice of the Pacific. For centuries, people have wondered how an ancient island culture, with no metal tools or complex machinery, could have built such an impossible city, leading to legends of magic and giants. Our story today takes us to one of the most remote and mysterious archaeological sites on the planet, a place so strange and so ambitious in its construction that it has been called the eighth wonder of the world, the Reef of Heaven, and the Venice of the Pacific. It is a lost, abandoned city, built in a way that seems to defy all logic. A place that has fueled legends of magic, giants, and lost civilizations for centuries. We are going to the Federated States of Micronesia, to a small volcanic island in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean called Pohnpei. And it is here, built upon a shallow coral reef just off the island's southeastern coast, that we find the incredible, impossible stone city of Nan Madol. To understand why this place is such a profound mystery, we must first explore what it is, to witness its sheer scale and the almost unbelievable engineering challenge that it represents. The first thing that makes Nan Madol so unique, so utterly unlike any other ancient city in the world, is its location and its very foundation. This is not a city that was built on solid ground. It was not carved into a mountainside or nestled in a river valley. Nan Madol is a city built on water. It is a vast and sprawling complex of nearly 100 small artificial islets, constructed on top of a shallow coral reef. These man-made islands are separated by a network of tidal canals and waterways, creating a city that is as much water as it is land. It is a true water world, a place where the primary mode of transportation would have been by canoe, where the streets were channels of shimmering seawater, and where the rhythm of life was dictated by the rising and falling of the tides. The name Nan Madol itself, in the local Pohnpeian language, means spaces between, a direct reference to the network of canals that crisscross the site. The sheer scale of the undertaking is difficult to comprehend. The entire complex covers an area of over 200 acres. The builders of Nan Madol did not just build a few platforms. They constructed an entire archipelago from scratch. They built these islands by first laying down a foundation of large coral boulders on the reef floor, and then building retaining walls on top of them to create the islets, which they then filled with coral rubble to raise them above the high tide line. On top of these artificial islands, they then constructed their buildings, their temples, their palaces, and their tombs. This was the ceremonial and political capital of a powerful and mysterious dynasty of rulers, known as the Sauteleur. The Sauteleur dynasty ruled the island of Pohnpei for over 1,000 years, from roughly 500 AD to around 1628 AD. And from this incredible waterborne city, they exerted their religious and political control over the entire island. Nan Madol was a city with a purpose. It was not a place for ordinary people to live. The commoners lived on the main island of Pohnpei. Nan Madol was a sacred royal precinct, reserved exclusively for the king, the Sauteleur, and the high-ranking nobility and priesthood. It was a place of immense power and ceremony. The layout of the city reflects this. It is divided into two main sectors. The upper town, known as Madol Pao, was the administrative and religious center. It contained the royal mortuary, the tombs of the great kings, and the temples where the most important religious rituals were performed. The lower town, Madol Pa, was the residential and functional sector, where the priests and nobles lived, where food was prepared for the king, and where sacred eels were kept and worshipped in a special pool. The Sauteleur king himself was a semi-divine figure, a god-king who was believed to have immense spiritual power. He lived in splendid isolation in his palace at Nan Madol, his every need catered to by the tribute and labor of the common people from the main island. The city was designed to inspire awe and to reinforce the absolute power of its rulers. It was a physical manifestation of their divine right to rule. A city that was literally set apart from the world of ordinary mortals, floating on a reef between the sea and the sky. This incredible feat of hydraulic engineering, of creating an entire city on a coral reef, would be enough on its own to make Nan Madol a world-class archaeological wonder. But it is not the location that makes the city truly impossible. It is the material from which it was built. And this brings us to the second and most profound mystery of Nan Madol: the stones. The walls of the islets, the foundations of the buildings, the great tombs, they are all constructed from massive columnar basalt. Basalt is a type of volcanic rock, hard, dark, and incredibly heavy. But the basalt of Nan Madol is of a very specific and unusual type. Through a natural process of cooling and fracturing, the basalt in certain locations on Pompeii formed into long multi-sided columns, almost like giant, naturally formed logs or beams. They look as if they have been cut and shaped by a master mason, but they are a product of nature. The builders of Nan Madol used these natural stone logs as their primary building material. And the scale of their use is simply mind-boggling. The walls of the islets and the buildings are constructed in a distinctive header and stretcher style, a crisscross pattern where long basalt logs are laid parallel to the wall, and then shorter logs are laid perpendicular to them, locking the structure together. It is a form of giant prehistoric Lincoln logs but made with stone. The logs themselves are enormous. A typical log might be 10 to 20 feet long and weigh several tons. But some of the cornerstones and foundational logs are truly gargantuan, weighing an estimated 50 tons or more. To put that in perspective, a 50-ton stone is the equivalent of about 8 or 9 large African elephants. The total amount of stone used to build Nan Madol is staggering. Archaeologists have estimated that the total weight of the columnar basalt used in the construction is around 750,000 metric tons. That is more than the total weight of all the stones used to build the great cathedrals of Europe. The Great Pyramid of Giza is more massive, of course, but it was built on a solid rock plateau, right next to its quarries. The builders of Nan Madol faced a far more complex logistical challenge. They had to quarry these massive stone logs, transport them many miles across both land and open water, and then somehow lift these multi-ton behemoths into place to build the walls of their city, some of which rise to a height of over 25 feet. And they accomplished all of this on a remote Pacific island, with no evidence of metal tools, no wheels, and no large draft animals to help them. This is the central, impossible question of Nan Madol. How did they do it? Let's break down the challenge. First, there is the quarrying. Archaeologists have located the primary quarries where the basalt logs were sourced. They are on the other side of Pompeii Island, in a place called Soaks. This means that every single one of those hundreds of thousands of stone logs had to be broken free from the bedrock. How did they do this without metal tools? The prevailing theory is that they used a combination of cleverness and brute force. They would find a natural crack in the rock face. They would then build a massive fire against the rock, heating it to an intense temperature. After several hours, they would douse the hot rock with cold water. The sudden change in temperature would cause the rock to fracture and expand, widening the natural cracks. They would then use large wooden poles as levers, prying the giant basalt columns free from the rock face. It would have been slow, dangerous, and incredibly laborious work. But quarrying the stones was only the first problem. The second, and arguably greater, challenge was transportation. They had to move these multi-ton logs from the quarry site at Soaks, across the rugged, mountainous interior of the island to the coast. And then they had to somehow get them into the water and transport them all the way around the island to the construction site at Nan Madol, a journey of many miles. How could they possibly move a 50-ton stone log through a dense jungle? The most likely theory is that they didn't. They probably used the island's river systems. They would have maneuvered the logs down the hillsides from the quarry to a nearby river, perhaps using a system of wooden rollers and ropes, a process that would have required hundreds of men. Once in the river, they could have floated them down to the coast. But even this presents a problem. Basalt is a very dense rock. It does not float. This has led to the theory that the builders of Nanmadel were also master mariners and raft builders. They would have had to construct enormous and incredibly buoyant rafts, perhaps by lashing together hundreds of large bamboo poles, to serve as transport barges. They would then have had to maneuver the giant stone logs onto these rafts, a feat of engineering in itself, and then navigate the rafts through the treacherous coastal waters, which are subject to strong currents and powerful storms. The entire transportation process would have been a massive, highly organized, and incredibly risky undertaking. A single mistake could mean losing a priceless stone log to the bottom of the ocean, or the death of the men trying to move it. And finally, there is the third and final challenge, the construction itself. Once the stone logs arrived at the site of Nanmadel, they had to be lifted out of the water and hoisted into place to build the high walls of the islets. How do you lift a 50-ton stone 25 feet into the air using only ropes and manpower? The archaeological consensus is that they likely used a system of inclined ramps and levers. They would have built a temporary earthen or wooden ramp up against the wall they were constructing. Then, using a combination of wooden levers, coconut fiber ropes, and sheer coordinated human strength, a team of hundreds of men would have slowly and painstakingly rolled or dragged the massive log up the ramp and into its position. Once one layer was complete, they would raise the ramp and begin the next. It would have been an incredibly slow, incremental process, a feat of patience and endurance that likely took centuries to complete. The construction of Nanmadel was not a single project. It was a multi-generational obsession, the life's work of an entire dynasty. When you stand back and consider all of these challenges together, the quarrying, the transportation, and the construction, the achievement of Nanmadel becomes almost superhuman. It represents a level of social organization, engineering skill, and sheer unwavering determination that is hard to fathom. The Sauteleur dynasty must have had absolute control over the population of Pohnpei. They must have been able to command a massive, continuous labor force for centuries. The construction would have required thousands of workers, along with the farmers and fishermen needed to feed them. It was a project on the scale of the Egyptian pyramids, but undertaken by a small, isolated island culture in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is the great enigma of Nanmadel. It is a city that, according to our conventional understanding of ancient technology and social organization, should not exist. It is a monument to a level of ambition and achievement that seems to go far beyond the known capabilities of its builders. And it is this impossibility, this gap between what we think they could do and what they clearly did, that has made Nanmadel a breeding ground for fantastic legends and a mystery that continues to haunt us to this day. It stands as a silent, powerful testament to the forgotten genius of the ancient mariners of the Pacific. To stand amidst the ruins of Nanmadel is to be confronted with a profound and seemingly impossible question. How? How did an ancient island culture, with no written language, no metal tools, no wheels, and no draft animals, quarry, transport, and assemble a city from hundreds of thousands of tons of massive volcanic rock? The sheer scale of the achievement seems to defy all rational explanation, and it is this apparent impossibility that lies at the very heart of the Nanmadel mystery. For centuries, this question has echoed through the mangrove forests and the watery canals of the abandoned city, giving rise to two very different kinds of answers. On one side, we have the world of legend and fringe theory, a world filled with magic, giants, and lost advanced technologies. On the other, we have the world of archaeology and experimental science, a world that seeks to explain the impossible through human ingenuity, immense manpower, and the patient application of simple physics. To solve the riddle of Nanmadel, we must explore both of these worlds, to weigh the legends of magic against the logic of levers and rafts. Let's first enter the world of legend. the stories that have been passed down for generations by the Pohnpeian people themselves. For the local inhabitants, the answer to the question of how is simple. It was not built by ordinary men. The construction of Nan Madol is attributed to magic. The most enduring local legend tells the story of two sorcerer brothers, Olisipa and Olisopa. These were not ordinary men. They were powerful magicians who came to Pohnpei from a mythical, far-off land. They were looking for a place to build a sacred altar to their god of agriculture. After several failed attempts at other locations around the island, they finally arrived at the shallow reef off the coast of Temwen. Here they saw a vision. They knew this was the place. But they did not build the city with their hands. According to the legend, they used their immense spiritual power to summon the giant basalt logs. They simply stood on the shore, performed their rituals, and through the power of their chanting and their magic, they caused the massive stone logs to fly through the air from the quarry on the other side of the island. The stones moved as if they were weightless, guided by the will of the two sorcerers, settling perfectly into place to form the walls and foundations of the great city. This story of magical construction is a powerful and elegant solution to the mystery. It explains how the immense stones could have been moved and lifted with no apparent technology. It was not a feat of engineering. It was a miracle. This legend is deeply ingrained in the local culture. It serves to emphasize the sacred and otherworldly nature of the site. Nan Madol was not just a city. It was a place touched by the gods, built by magic for a divine purpose. Other, similar legends also hint at a non-human intervention. Some local myths speak of a race of giants who once inhabited the island. These giants, with their superhuman strength, were able to quarry the stones and lift them into place with their bare hands. In this version of the story, the mystery is explained not by magic, but by the sheer brute force of a forgotten race of powerful beings. These legends, whether of sorcerers or giants, all share a common theme. The construction of Nan Madol was beyond the capabilities of ordinary mortals. In the 20th and 21st centuries, these ancient legends have been given a modern technological twist by proponents of fringe and ancient astronaut theories. These modern theorists look at the legend of flying stones and see not magic, but a forgotten advanced technology. They take the core of the legend and replace the supernatural explanation with a pseudoscientific one. One of the most popular of these theories is the idea of acoustic levitation. This theory proposes that the builders of Nan Madol had discovered a sophisticated understanding of sound and vibration. By using a combination of powerful chanting, specific frequencies generated by musical instruments, and perhaps some kind of crystal-based technology, they were able to create focused sound waves that could counteract the force of gravity, allowing them to levitate the massive stone logs and float them into position. The magic of the sorcerer brothers in this view was not magic at all. It was an advanced form of sonic engineering. Another, related fringe theory suggests the use of some form of electromagnetic energy. This theory points to the fact that basalt is a volcanic rock that often has a high iron content, making it slightly magnetic. The theory speculates that the builders had harnessed some form of powerful, localized electromagnetic field to lift and maneuver the magnetic stones. And, of course, there is the ever-present ancient astronaut theory. For these theorists, the answer is simple. The sorcerer brothers were not human at all. They were extraterrestrial visitors. The flying stones were not moved by magic or sound waves. They were moved by the advanced tractor beam technology of an alien spacecraft. In this scenario, Nan Madol was either built by the aliens themselves, perhaps as a base or a ceremonial center, or it was built by the local people under the direction of these alien gods, using alien tools and technology. These modern fringe theories are, in essence, just updated versions of the original legends. They take the central premise that ordinary humans could not have built Nan Madol. They replace the ancient explanation of magic with a modern vocabulary of levitation, sonic frequencies, and alien technology. While these theories are highly speculative and have no direct physical evidence to support them, They persist because they offer a simple and dramatic solution to the central, impossible problem of the site. But what happens when we leave the world of legend and fringe theory and enter the world of archaeology? Mainstream scientists offer a very different, and perhaps even more impressive explanation for how Nan Madol was built. Their explanation does not require magic or aliens. It requires something else: an unwavering belief in the incredible ingenuity, the immense patience, and the sheer coordinated power of human beings. The archaeological explanation is a story of cleverness, hard work, and a society that was organized enough to sustain a monumental construction project for centuries. Let's begin once again at the quarry. The fringe theories often ignore this crucial first step. But archaeologists have studied the quarries at Soaks in great detail, and they have found compelling evidence of how the stones were likely extracted. The theory of using fire and water to crack the rock is supported by archaeological evidence from other ancient quarries around the world. But the Pohnpeian builders may have also used a simpler, if more laborious technique. They would have used hard, dense stone tools to painstakingly peck and pound at the rock, slowly creating a groove. Then they would have inserted large, dry wooden wedges into the groove. They would then pour water onto the wedges. The dry wood would absorb the water and expand with incredible force, a force strong enough to split a multi-ton basalt column from the rock face. This process, known as wedge and feather, is a known ancient quarrying technique. It required no advanced technology, only immense patience and a deep understanding of the properties of wood and stone. The next and greatest challenge was transport. How do you move a 50-ton log? The archaeological theory rests on a combination of water transport and immense manpower. The idea of using rafts is the most plausible scenario. Pohnpei is a lush, tropical island, and while it lacks large trees suitable for dugout canoes, it is rich in other resources, particularly bamboo. Archaeologists and experimental historians have proposed that the builders constructed massive rafts, or barges, made from hundreds of giant bamboo poles lashed together with strong coconut fiber rope. Bamboo is incredibly buoyant and strong. A large enough bamboo raft could certainly support the weight of even the heaviest stone logs. The process would have been a major undertaking. The logs would have been slowly maneuvered from the quarry down to the coast, likely using a system of wooden rollers, levers, and hundreds of men pulling on ropes. Once at the coast, they would have had to build a temporary jetty or ramp to slide the log onto the waiting raft. Then came the sea journey. The builders would have taken advantage of the island's tides. They would have floated the massive, stone-laden rafts during high tide, and then used canoes, paddled by dozens of men, to tow the rafts along the coast to the construction site at Nan Madol. It would have been a slow, precarious, and dangerous journey. But the people who built Nan Madol were part of the great Austronesian seafaring tradition. They were master navigators and canoe builders. They understood the sea, its currents, and its tides better than anyone. While the journey would have been difficult, it was not beyond their known capabilities. And finally, there is the construction itself, the lifting of the stones. The archaeological explanation here is a testament to the power of simple machines. The primary tool would have been the ramp. As the walls of an islet were being built, the workers would have constructed a ramp of earth, logs, or coral rubble leading up to the top of the wall. They would then have had to get the massive stone log from the raft at high tide onto the base of the ramp. Then the real work would begin. Using a combination of long, hardwood poles as levers to lift the front of the log, and placing wooden rollers underneath it, a large team of workers would have slowly, inch by painful inch, pulled and pushed the log up the ramp. It would have been a monumental task of coordinated effort, a slow-motion ballet of human strength, accompanied by the chanting and singing that would have been necessary to keep the hundreds of men all pulling and pushing in perfect rhythm. Once the log reached the top of the ramp, they would use the levers again to maneuver it into its final position on the wall. They would then raise the height of the ramp and repeat the process for the next layer. This explanation using fire, water, wedges, rafts, ramps, and levers requires no magic. It requires no lost advanced technology, but it does require something that is, in its own way, just as awe-inspiring: a level of social organization and unwavering multi-generational commitment that is almost difficult for us to imagine. The construction of Nan Madol was not a quick process. It was likely the central defining project of the Sauteleur dynasty for centuries. It would have required a society ruled by a powerful centralized authority, a king who had the absolute power to command the labor of thousands of his subjects for their entire lives. It would have required a highly organized society, with skilled engineers who understood the principles of leverage and buoyancy, with foremen who could direct the massive teams of workers, and with a system for feeding and housing this immense labor force. In this sense, the archaeological explanation does not diminish the achievement of Nan Madol. It enhances it. It replaces a simple magical explanation with a far more complex and impressive human one. It suggests that the true magic of Nan Madol was not in making stones fly, but in the ability of the Sauteleur rulers to organize their society to achieve a single monumental goal. The city stands as a testament not to alien visitors, but to the incredible potential of human cooperation and the unwavering power of a shared belief. The stones were not moved by sorcerers. They were moved by the sweat, the muscle, the ingenuity, and the sheer bloody-minded determination of thousands of human beings, working together over centuries to build an impossible city in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And that, perhaps, is the most wondrous and mysterious story of all. Nan Madol stands as a testament to the incredible ingenuity and determination of an ancient people. While legends speak of magic and aliens, the reality is perhaps even more impressive. A story of human beings, using only their hands, their minds, and their unwavering will, who moved mountains of stone to build a magnificent city in the middle of the ocean. Off the coast of India, hidden beneath 120 feet of water, scientists found the ruins of a massive ancient city. Its discovery could completely rewrite the history of civilization as we know it. The story of the world's great archaeological discoveries often follows a familiar script. It usually begins with the determined archaeologist, guided by ancient texts or local legends, who spends years searching for a specific long-lost site. But sometimes the most profound and world-changing discoveries are not the result of a deliberate search at all. They are the product of pure blind accidental luck. Our story today is one of those moments. It is the story of a team of scientists who were not looking for a lost city, who were not interested in history or archaeology, but who, in the course of their routine mundane work, stumbled upon something so vast, so ancient, and so utterly unexpected that it had the potential to completely rewrite the opening chapters of human civilization. This is the story of the accidental discovery of a massive, submerged city in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Our story begins in December of 2000, not in a dusty desert or a remote jungle, but on the deck of a modern scientific research vessel floating in the Arabian Sea. The vessel belonged to India's National Institute of Ocean Technology, or NIOT. The team of scientists and engineers on board were not on a quest for ancient history. Their mission was a thoroughly modern and practical one. They were studying the effects of marine pollution. Their specific area of focus was the Gulf of Cambay, also known as the Gulf of Khumbat, a large inlet of the Arabian Sea located on the west coast of India, in the state of Gujarat. This is a region with several major rivers flowing into it, and it is a busy industrial and shipping corridor. The NIOT team was tasked with mapping the seabed, studying the ocean currents, and charting the levels of pollution in the water. To do this, they were using a state-of-the-art piece of equipment, a side-scan sonar. Side-scan sonar is a powerful tool for underwater mapping. The instrument is typically housed in a torpedo-shaped device, called a towfish, which is towed behind the ship on a long cable. As it moves through the water, the sonar instrument sends out fans of acoustic pulses, or sound waves, to the left and right. These sound waves travel down to the seabed, bounce off of it, and then return to the sensor. A computer on board the ship then measures the time it takes for the sound to return and the strength of the returning signal. By doing this thousands of times a second, it can create a detailed, almost photographic, black and white image of the ocean floor. It can map the texture of the seabed, distinguishing between soft mud, sand, and hard rock. And most importantly, it can reveal the shape and size of any objects or structures that are lying on the seafloor. The NIOT team was using this technology to create a detailed map of the pollution sediment, but the instrument, of course, maps everything it sees. For weeks, the survey was routine. The sonar images showed exactly what the scientists expected to see: a vast, monotonous, and largely featureless underwater plain of mud and sand, shaped by the powerful tidal currents that sweep through the Gulf. The work was important, but it was also repetitive and predictable. And then one day, as the ship was surveying an area about 20 miles off the coast, at a depth of around 120 feet, something completely unexpected appeared on the sonar screen. The featureless muddy bottom was suddenly interrupted by a series of strong, clear, and distinctly geometric shapes. These were not the random, rounded forms of natural rock outcroppings. These were straight lines. They were right angles. They were the unmistakable rectangular and square outlines of what looked like the foundations of buildings. The team on board was baffled. They checked their equipment. They double-checked their position. But the strange geometric patterns remained. As they continued their survey, the scale of the anomaly became apparent. This was not just one or two strange shapes. They were mapping out a vast and complex site. The sonar images revealed what looked like a grid-like pattern, a network of features that bore a striking resemblance to a human settlement. They could see long linear features that looked like roads or channels. They could see large, open, rectangular areas that looked like plazas or courtyards. And they could see dozens and then hundreds of smaller rectangular and square foundations, the ghostly footprints of long-vanished buildings. The site was enormous. The sonar data revealed a settlement that stretched for over 5 miles along the bank of what appeared to be an ancient, now submerged, river channel. The scientists were stunned. They were oceanographers and engineers, not archaeologists, but they knew enough to recognize that what they were looking at was not natural. The chances of natural geological processes creating such a vast and complex pattern of perfectly straight lines and right angles were infinitesimally small. They knew, with a growing sense of awe and disbelief, that they were looking at a city. A massive ancient city, buried under 120 feet of water. This was a discovery of monumental importance. They had accidentally stumbled upon what could be one of the largest and oldest underwater archaeological sites in the world. The news of the discovery was announced to the world in May of 2001 by the then Minister for Science and Technology of India. The announcement caused an immediate and global sensation. The sonar images were released to the public, and they were breathtaking. They showed a world that had been lost to the sea, the ghostly outlines of a great metropolis. The media dubbed it the lost city of Dwarka, linking the discovery to the legendary, submerged city of the Hindu god Krishna, which was said to have been located in this very region. The discovery was hailed as a moment of great national pride for India, a potential rewriting of its most ancient history. But it also ignited a firestorm of debate and speculation. This was a real city. How old was it? And how did it end up at the bottom of the sea? The NIOT team, now thrust into the role of underwater archaeologists, knew that sonar images alone were not enough. They had to get physical proof. They had to recover actual artifacts from the site to prove that it was man-made and to determine its age. This was an incredibly challenging task. The Gulf of Cambay is a notoriously difficult environment to work in. The tidal currents are some of the strongest in the world, capable of moving at over 10 knots. The water is murky with near-zero visibility, making it impossible for divers to explore the site visually. The only way to get samples was to work blind, using a large, heavy-duty dredging machine lowered from the ship. This is a crude and destructive method of archaeology, the equivalent of digging up a delicate historical site with the bulldozer. But it was their only option. They lowered the dredge down to the locations where the sonar had indicated the presence of the structures. Time and again, they scooped up tons of mud and sand from the seabed and brought it to the surface. And amidst the mud, they began to find things. They found pieces of pottery, simply made but clearly handcrafted. They found polished stone tools, beads, and fragments of what appeared to be sculptures. They found human teeth and bones. And most importantly, they found several pieces of wood that had been preserved in the oxygen-poor mud. Pieces that appeared to have been part of the ancient structures. These artifacts were the physical proof they needed. The geometric patterns on the sonar screen were not an illusion. They were real. This was, without a doubt, a man-made site, a lost city that had been home to a thriving human population. The accidental survey had led to one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. But the biggest revelation, the one that would challenge the very foundations of world history, was yet to come. It was hidden inside the very fibers of the pieces of wood they had dredged from the bottom of the sea. The discovery of the sprawling geometric structures at the bottom of the Gulf of Cambay was a monumental event in itself. The sonar images and the recovered artifacts provided undeniable proof that a large, ancient city lay submerged beneath the waves. The NIOT team had accidentally stumbled upon a lost world. But the real bombshell, the discovery that would elevate this from an important national find to a globally significant and intensely controversial one, was yet to come. It was a discovery that threatened to take the established timeline of human civilization, a timeline that had been carefully constructed over 2 centuries of archaeology, and shatter it into a million pieces. The mystery was no longer just about what the city was but when it existed. And the answer to that question, proposed by the discovery team, was so radical, so ancient, that it seemed to be an impossibility. The key to unlocking the age of the sunken city lay in the organic materials that had been recovered by the dredge. While stone tools and pottery can be difficult to date precisely, organic materials like wood contain a natural clock, carbon-14. The NIOT team had recovered several pieces of wood from the site, including one large log that appeared to be an architectural beam from one of the submerged structures. They sent this precious sample to 2 of the most respected laboratories in India for radiocarbon dating. The process is a standard scientific procedure. All living things absorb carbon from the atmosphere, including a tiny amount of the radioactive isotope carbon-14. When an organism like a tree dies, it stops absorbing carbon. The carbon-14 within it then begins to decay at a steady, predictable rate. By measuring the amount of carbon-14 remaining in a sample, scientists can calculate with a high degree of accuracy how long ago that organism died. It is the gold standard for dating ancient organic remains. When the results came back from the labs, they were so astonishing that the researchers could barely believe them. The piece of wood, the architectural beam from the sunken city, was dated to approximately 9,500 years before the present day. That meant it was from around the year 7,500 BC. This was not a minor revision of the historical timeline. This was a complete rewriting of it. The date was so old it seemed to be a mistake. The team had the samples tested again at different labs to be certain. But the results were consistent. The wood from the underwater city was, according to the carbon dating, 9,500 years old. To understand the profound and shocking implication of this date, we have to place it in the context of what we know about the history of civilization. According to the standard textbook model of history, the first true cities and the dawn of what we call civilization occurred in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq around 3,500 to 4,000 BC. This is the era of the Sumerians, the people who invented writing, built the first monumental temples, and created the first complex urban societies. A few hundred years later, The civilization of ancient Egypt arose along the Nile River. These two regions, Mesopotamia and Egypt, are famously known as the cradles of civilization. For decades, archaeologists have believed that it was here, in the Fertile Crescent, that the great experiment of urban living began. The earliest known large, permanent settlements with evidence of organized agriculture, like Jericho or Catalhoyuk, date back to around 8000 or 7000 BC, but these are generally considered to be large towns or proto-cities, not the massive, highly organized urban centers that were found in Sumer. Now, consider the date from the Gulf of Cambay, 7500 BC. If this date is correct, it means that a massive sprawling city, 5 miles long, existed off the coast of India a full 3,500 years before the first cities of Mesopotamia. It would mean that while the people of the Fertile Crescent were just beginning to experiment with farming and building small, permanent villages, a vast and sophisticated civilization was already thriving in India, building great cities with grid-like patterns and complex structures. It would mean that the cradle of civilization was not in the Middle East, but on the Indian subcontinent. It would push back the timeline for large-scale urban living by several millennia. It would, in short, force us to throw out all of our history books and start again. The implications were, and are, staggering. The discovery suggested the existence of a lost, prehistoric supercivilization, a mother culture that was far older and more advanced than anyone had ever dared to imagine. This is where the story of the Gulf of Cambay becomes intensely controversial. The announcement of the 9,500-year-old date was met with a mixture of excitement and extreme skepticism from the global archaeological community. For many in India, it was a moment of immense national pride, proof that their own history was even older and grander than previously thought. It seemed to provide a historical basis for the ancient Vedic tales of great cities that existed in a much earlier epoch. But for many mainstream archaeologists, particularly in the West, the claim was simply too extraordinary to be accepted without overwhelming proof. The skepticism was not necessarily a bias against India, but a healthy scientific reaction to a claim that contradicted a century's worth of established evidence. The critics raised several major objections. Their primary concern was with the context of the artifacts. The Gulf of Cambay is not a calm, placid lake. It is a dynamic and violent environment with some of the most powerful tidal currents on the planet. The seabed is constantly being churned and redeposited. The critics argued that it is entirely possible that the piece of wood that was dated was not actually associated with the man-made structures. The powerful currents could have easily picked up a 9,500-year-old piece of wood from a Neolithic site that was once on the riverbank and deposited it, centuries later, among the ruins of a much younger city. In archaeology, association is everything. You have to be able to prove that an object you are dating was found in a direct, undisturbed relationship with the structure you are trying to date. Because the artifacts from Cambay were recovered by dredging, a process that rips everything from the seabed without any regard for its original location, this crucial association was lost. The critics argued that you could not use a single piece of dredged-up wood to date an entire 5-mile-long city. Furthermore, they pointed out that the other artifacts recovered, the pottery, the beads, appeared to be of a style that was more consistent with the Harappan civilization, a known and well-studied Bronze Age culture that thrived in the region around 2500 BC. They suggested a more plausible, if less dramatic, scenario. The city in the Gulf of Cambay was likely an outpost of the Harappan civilization that was submerged by a flood or a rise in sea level a few thousand years ago. The 9,500-year-old piece of wood was simply an older, unrelated artifact that had been washed into the site by the powerful currents. This explanation was far less exciting, but it did not require the complete rewriting of world history. The debate became a classic standoff between a new, revolutionary claim and the established scientific consensus. The discovery team at NIOT stood by their findings, arguing that the geometric city was too vast and too well organized to be from the Harappan period, and that the carbon date was scientifically sound. The mainstream archaeological community, however, remained largely unconvinced, demanding more evidence, more artifacts recovered from a secure, undisturbed context, before they would even consider abandoning the established timeline of civilization. And so, the sunken city in the Gulf of Cambay remains a profound and deeply controversial enigma. Is it the oldest city in the world, the lost mother city of a forgotten prehistoric age? A discovery that will one day be seen as the most important of the 21st century? Or is it a more modest Bronze Age settlement, whose significance has been inflated by a single out-of-context carbon date? Until more research is done, until divers or submersibles can properly excavate the site and establish a clear, undisturbed timeline, the city will remain in a kind of historical limbo, a question mark on the map of the ancient world. It is a mystery that pits the explosive potential of a single revolutionary piece of data against the immense, collective weight of established historical knowledge. The sunken city in the Gulf of Cambay remains a profound enigma. Is it the oldest city in the world, proof of a lost, prehistoric supercivilization, or a geological anomaly? If the past still whispers to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ancient Relics Keeper, because some mysteries were never meant to be buried.